Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 165. And this week it is Terri's turn to share something. Terri, what do you have?
Well, Daisy, I went in search of something new this week, and that's right. I found a topic that I think you and I will enjoy talking about. It wasn't particularly a content-dense episode, and sometimes those are even more fun to do because one of us is not feeling pressured to share a whole bunch of information. But it's from a podcast called Mentally Stronger with Therapist Amy Morin. And she is a therapist who lives on a boat in the Florida Keys, which sounds quite lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the topic that I thought you and I might enjoy talking about is called Furry Friends, Happy Minds. The surprising ways pets boost your mental health with Veterinarian Dr. Doug Mader.
Or maybe the unsurprising ways. We shall see.
Correct. Probably not surprising for the two of us. So the two started talking, talked a little bit about his history with being a veterinarian. He is not only a veterinarian of common house pets like dogs and cats and birds and things, but all kinds of exotic animals. He has certification in all kinds of things. And now that he's in the Florida Keys, he takes care of alligators in the swamps and the deer in the Keys, all kinds of things. But very kind of interesting background. And she shared some background. I think they actually met because she had a cat that she had taken to him, and her cat died when it was 19, and he was a part of that. So they did talk about the grieving and losing pets. But when she started talking about why she was bringing this up as far as, as a therapist and helping people, she's written books about mental strength and things. So people might wonder, why is she focusing on pets? And she talked about one of her friends who is in addiction recovery, helping people. He's a therapist helping people recover from addictions. Talked about the importance, and one of his big suggestions in his list of things people could be doing to feel better and to change their addictive habits. One of them that he almost always recommends is to get a dog. So I thought that was interesting. So at any level, they talked about the fact that having a pet, connecting with a pet, touching a pet, petting a pet, that it, one, gives us a sense of connection, which most of us need. And particularly, I think after COVID, we find this more and more the case. But the reality is that having a pet can increase your levels of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. All of these are, chemicals that help us to feel good, to feel calm, and also decreased levels of cortisol. So I think it's really important, people who might kind of poo-poo a little bit, people looking for a pet or having a pet, to think about chemically what we're doing to help ourselves. And the veterinarian guest, talked about the idea that he quoted something like 90% of people who have pets report these benefits. And also the American Veterinary Association or something did some research and found that 30 to 40% of pet owners actually see their pets as a child surrogate, like that they see their dog or cat or bird or whatever as their child. And I thought that was really interesting. I know you and I talk a lot about that, but that it's really common. And so kind of, again, emphasizing the role that pets play in our lives, in our mental health, in our relational kind of way of navigating things. So they talked about, well, how is it that getting a dog could help with something like depression? And as a therapist, she often recommends people connecting with a pet because it's a little bit of a social connection. It's also something that often creates other social opportunities. And I was thinking about how often I've heard you describe in the past couple of years since you've moved, how much you've connected with people because you've been at the park with your dogs and you've connected with other dog owners. You know their dogs, they know your dogs, and then you become friends with them.
Yeah, most of the people I've become friendly with are either other dog owners or even I was laughing about one of my friends who I see a lot who isn't, but I met her. She lives opposite the gate where I enter into the dog park, and she stopped me and said hello one day. She recognized me from Facebook, but they're all pretty much everyone I know is linked to the dogs. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it helps with our social connections, not only with the animal, but with other people.
And I always think, I judge people on how they feel about dogs. So you've got that automatic thing with anyone you meet that they already tick one box, one of your boxes, that they're going to be someone you potentially get on with because they also have a dog that they love.
That's right. She mentioned specifically in talking about the effects of dogs for people that for many people, like with depression or something, it gets you outside. So all of the benefits of getting outside, the sunlight and fresh air and all of those things, it also makes you get up. It makes you get out of the house. It makes you go and do and kind of have a routine. It also, for many people, provides a sense of purpose. And I remember a person very close to me who was experiencing suicidality and was really struggling with that, but had several pets. And I really believe that for a while it was knowing that they were responsible for caring for these pets that gave them a reason to keep living.
Yeah.
And, so if you think of when you get to that dark of a place, a pet can really make a difference. It was something for her to hold on to, a reason to stick around. And I think that's really important. The veterinarian also talked about the many studies that show petting a pet. Now, this might not work so well with your pet iguana or something, but petting an animal, the effects of lowering blood pressure and heart rate, how important that is. And, hypertension is one of the biggest health problems that many cultures and countries face. What an important thing to be able to lower that risk having a pet. Also talked about anxiety. Again, all of these chemical responses and helping with the anxiety, but also focusing on something else other than your anxiety can help you get out of the anxiety. So focusing on what's the pet doing right now? What do you need to do to take care of the pet? Do you need to get any supplies for the pet? So I think those are important things. They talked a little bit about support animals, and they talked about the kind of debate right now about people keeping what type of animal and claiming it as a support animal. And interestingly, he said dogs and horses are actually the most effective support animals. However, miniature horses have been banned from being on an airplane. So I encourage people not to go out and do that. But they did talk about the idea that, suddenly everyone just started calling any animal that they had a support animal, and that kind of made the support animal practice a little more complicated to navigate and to regulate. But, horses are very intuitive. They can read you, that's why we have someone like called the horse whisperer. They can really intuit your feelings. And they talked about pets in general and animals in general, that they do have feelings. And, someone eventually came out, some PhD said, we have now found that dogs have emotions. And he's like, you only have to ask any pet owner and they can tell you, of course, the animal has emotions. So they talked a little bit about, since they're kind of talking up getting a pet or having a pet, when is it not maybe the best thing for someone to have a pet, or what type of pet? They really encourage that if you're considering getting a pet, or if you're considering getting a pet for someone, that one thing to check out is, are they or are you able to be responsible for the pet? For example, if you work a job where you're gone 12 hours a day and basically come home and go to bed, probably a puppy would not be a good choice, but maybe a hermit crab. And they talked a lot about hermit crabs, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the future, but they don't require a lot of attention. And so testing out kind of the ability, the feasibility of having the responsibility for whatever kind of pet. Does this pet, this animal, fit within a lifestyle that you're willing to do? Again, if I want to get a puppy, I can't be gone super long hours, or I need to get someone who can come in and train them during the day or take them out during the day, or I need a mechanism. So it's really important for people to think about their own lifestyle and how does that fit the needs of that particular type of animal. He used the example, if you had an elderly parent that you really thought would benefit from having a pet, maybe a Rottweiler might not be the best gift to get them, but maybe a bird or a hermit crab. So just thinking about that. And also, I think they didn't talk about this, but I think one of the important things to consider if you're going to get a pet is cost. Not only the original purchase, I'm guessing a hermit crab does not cost very much, but how expensive are they for upkeep? Dogs require a lot of expense for upkeep, and cats and things. So just thinking about the long-term expense and whether you can accommodate that. They also talked about for people who can't accommodate a pet, maybe based on their living arrangement or their personal health or whatnot, that they could also maybe do some volunteering. They could visit places where there are animals. There are cat cafes if you really like cats. Maybe you could go sit there and pet other people's cats, or go to a dog park and watch the other dogs and interact, or volunteer at a shelter and walk some dogs or hang out with some animals. But it doesn't have to be that you have to own them. The other thing I thought, she mentioned this later, but I thought this was fascinating. Those pet videos that you and I like to send to each other, Daisy? Well, they can actually help improve mental health and increase productivity. So I feel a lot less guilty now of all the Frenchie videos that I find and send to you. I'm actually helping both your and my mental health and our productivity. I have several friends that I send them many videos a day of funny animal videos, but actually that can be helpful. So you don't have to own a pet in order for this to be helpful. They then talked a little bit about how to know what kind of pet to get. So we talked a little bit about how much time and energy do they take, how expensive, what's the upkeep like. Another thing to think about is how long do they live? And one of the unfortunate things of dogs is that they don't live very long, or cats, they don't live long enough for many of us. But do you know how long a hermit crab lives, Daisy?
I'm going to guess from the way the conversation is heading, it's going to be one of these things that lives forever, like parrots can live for 100 years.
They didn't mention that long, but 25 to 30 years if they're well taken care of. Now, as a kid, I had hermit crabs and mine never lasted that long, but 25 to 30 years. So again, low maintenance. And then they went into some more details again.
It's like tortoises, isn't it? You have to
get them shells.
You inherit them because they go on for so long that they get passed down generations.
There are even hermit crab clubs. You can purchase new shells. Some people really get into that. It's kind of like buying clothes for your dog. It's like, which shell am I going to buy for my hermit crab? They're low maintenance and they don't have a lot of space needs. So again, someone who might be living in an assisted care living arrangement can maybe have a hermit crab, though they probably shouldn't have maybe a cat or a dog based on those needs.
Yes, they're actually quite interesting, hermit crabs. Funnily enough, it brings to mind a book on Audible that I was listening to recently called The Golden Mole. And they talk about lots of interesting aminals. That's what we used to say when, because my sister used to pronounce animals, aminals. But they concentrate on a different animal for each chapter. And there is a chapter on hermit crabs. And there were some interesting facts about them. And one of the things I remembered, it just brought to mind when you said about getting them new shells. One, that they actually often end up using other strange things for shells, like coconut shells and all sorts of different things. They don't necessarily use hermit crab shells. They use other things as shells. But they were saying they have this thing where when they find an empty shell, Apparently someone comes along and sees if it's a good fit. And if it isn't, they kind of join hands, as it were, or pincers. I can't remember exactly the terminology, but they link up with a load of other hermit crabs and they order themselves in size order. So they sort of try this shell, and whoever finds it's the right size shell for them takes the new shell. But then because they're all ordered in size, they then pass down their shell. So the one that's upgrading to this new one passes their shell to the next crab, and so on and so forth down this line. Fascinating. Really good book. I recommend it. But they did have a chapter on hermit crabs.
Who knew we would ever do a podcast episode focused primarily
on hermit crabs?
That's right. That's right.
I didn't really know you could keep them as pets.
Obviously, they can be very popular as pets. So to wrap up their interview, or actually after their interview, Amy Morin, the woman whose podcast this is, she just kind of goes back and summarizes before she finishes out the episode. And she talked about some of the value of having a pet. She talked about the idea of how they can curb loneliness, the chemical pieces that we talked about earlier. There's actually been some research that kids with autism who read to dogs actually improve their social skills. And anxiety in kids is reduced when petting farm animals. So I think about so many elementary schools here in the US. One of the trips that you take is, to a petting zoo, or parents taking their kids to petting zoos. But the fact that that can actually help reduce anxiety, I thought was interesting. And then she just highlighted again the importance of researching the needs of an animal and the ability of you or the other person that you might be getting an animal for, that they can accommodate the needs of that kind of animal. And that also, even if you can't have a pet, there are lots of ways you can have interaction with animals to get all of these benefits. And maybe we'll share a good pet video in our link to help people to benefit.
Yes, and I think depending on the animals you've chosen, intentional use of the plural there. I don't think I've had a single animal for a long, long time. But you do have to a certain extent, think about life decisions. You have to really take them into account. I mean, there were deal breakers. When I moved back to the UK, there were deal breakers about where I could live. It had to have a garden. And that garden had to be fenceable. It had to be, I had to be able to secure it. And it wasn't something that I could share. I had to be able to, let my dogs out somewhere that they were going to be safe. I had things changed in the lease. There was some, dodgy part of the lease that the way it was worded, it was a real old lease. Often they have these archaic parts to them. And it was such vague language. But it basically boiled down to the fact that it could be read as, if someone made a complaint, I could be made to get rid of my dogs. And that was a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't change this clause in the lease, sales off. So, yeah, we often want, once you take on that commitment, your life doesn't necessarily have to completely revolve around them, but it affects decisions that you make, jobs that you take, various life decisions. Because like you say, you can't suddenly go out to work all day. I mean, you can, but you're going to have to put something in place to make sure that they're taken care of.
It's a great point. I have been tempted for a couple of years now, wanting to live a little bit of a nomadic life, go somewhere, live there for a month, and then go somewhere else and experience that. But that's really hard to do with dogs, especially I want to go spend a couple of months in Argentina and then in Spain or somewhere else. And, you can't just uproot a dog. And like you said, finding a place where you can live with them and their care and everything, that factors into those decisions. So I do think for a lot of people, assessing what the animal's needs are is also what lifestyle will you live having that pet. And again, some animals don't affect your lifestyle greatly. I used to have cats before I had dogs, and I love cats, but they were so much easier. I didn't have to be there at certain times of the day to feed them. My cats could pretty safely feed themselves.
Yeah, same. If I go and stay at my mum's overnight or something, I can just leave the food because they're indoor, outdoor cats. They can come and go as they want. And yeah, I can leave them up to a few days and they just fend for themselves.
That worked well for me until the one time that I came home and couldn't find my cat and wondered where she was, and started calling her, and I could hear her, but I couldn't see her. Before I had left, I had shut her in the closet. So she spent a long weekend in the closet with no food, no water, and no litter box. Not my best pet parenting moment.
No. But no, I think we are both very firmly dog people. I'm not a cat person, as I'm sure some of the listeners will know. I do have cats as well.
As I can attest to, because I can see a cat climbing around behind you.
Can see one of them at the moment, and they occasionally meow very loudly. But yes, I think dogs in particular, because you do have to structure your day to a certain extent with them in mind. They are creatures of routine. I always love mine. Have always been very good. Other people talk about, I have to get up at a certain time because the dogs make me. Mine are actually very good at fitting into whatever routine I give them. But they do love it when we have a certain routine. And the more routine we have, the more they do start nagging me. Like we get to sort of between that 7:30 slot in the morning, they're looking at me now like, come on, they're looking at their watches. Yeah, we're usually out the door by now. Get on with it. And when it's dinner time and things like that, they're very amenable, but they do. You have to do things. You have to take them for a walk. You have to feed them. You have to, give them some love and attention. And so, from a mental health point of view, they really. And the benefits, I've often thought of them. I used to kind of call them, they're what kept I used to think of, the depression as the wolf, and they were the, my dogs who kept the wolf at the door. They couldn't keep it away completely, but boy, did they help. Mm-hmm. And, the difference you see with a lot of homeless people and people living on the street who have dogs, and there are now, so I don't know what it's like over there in the States, but here, there are lots of charities that help homeless people, help the homeless dogs, help the dogs with them as well, and help support the homeless people to keep their dogs. There are shelters that they can go to and take their dogs, because a lot of people will refuse to go. If they're given a bed for a night at their shelter and they can't take their dog, well, I'm not coming then. Their dogs are everything to them, and I can absolutely see why. I can see how it will be the dogs that, literally will keep them warm in the winter, but that will get them through. And yeah, just down the road from me is a drop-in day centre where they do a meal every morning. And so I tend to walk past every day, and there's at least one person there with the dogs. There are lots of homeless people around that have dogs, and I can just imagine that they're just as much everything to them,
absolutely,
as they are to us.
Absolutely. So as I said, I didn't think this would be one of those topics we wouldn't enjoy talking about, that we see very similarly. And I hope for any listener, if you have a pet, you continue to honor them for the benefits they bring you. And if you're someone who doesn't and you're interested, that you take some time to really research and weigh out what kind of pet might fit your life the best. And if you're someone who can't get a pet but is interested, don't forget to watch those videos and visit some other people's pets.
Yeah, and I like that it helps boost your productivity.
I'll start sending more, Daisy.
I do remember actually when one of my stays in hospital, when I was feeling particularly miserable, someone I'd come to rely on as a friend who'd let me down big time. So I went into hospital feeling really, really not good. And one of the ways I cheered myself up actually was to watch cute puppy videos and cute kitten videos. And you can feel it you can feel it working. But I'm very aware in that moment. You know, we've talked about gratitude journals, and the dogs have always been something that feature heavily in that. But I'm often very aware of those moments. Like I was in the park this morning, just watching them playing and them making me laugh. And, you can feel those chemicals that you were talking about coursing through your body when you're watching them and enjoying watching them play, or they're making you laugh, or they come up and look at you with those puppy eyes and demand cuddles. And
really powerful.
Definitely. Well, before we sign off, we are heading into August, and we thought we would take a little bit of a podcast break, or a podcast vacay, as our friend Kim called it. But we're going to take a bit of a break from recording new episodes for August, but we will be choosing a couple of our favourite episodes each to replay. So you will have something to listen to every week.
Very good. And in that time, you could search for your hermit crab.
Yeah. I'm going to be Googling now and looking for videos on pet hermit crabs. Okay. Not that I'm not inspired to get a hermit crab myself, but I want to look at other people who have pet hermit crabs.
Check to see. There may be a hermit crab club near you, Daisy.
There might. I won't be attending. I do have a little bit of a fear of crabs, so I'm not. They're not quite up there with jellyfish, but they're not far behind.
All right. Well, take good care, everyone, and we will be back soon.
Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful month, and we will be back with you before you know it. Bye, everyone.